We heard that NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman said this week at the Board of Governors meetings that, the cap could go up $4.5 million, and that's going to directly play into what, the players may be doing, paying it back. So what needs to happen in order for the cap to go up that much?
Well, here's what I found out. A lot needs to go right when you look at this $4.5 potential million increase in terms of this summer. And because of that, a lot of people that I've spoken to in the last 48 hours tend to believe that the NHL's projection to have the cap go up that much and the debt to be paid off this season as a bit rosy in terms of a projection. I'm told that the players owe somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 to $500 million. So let's call it a ballpark $450 million as the start of this season as what they need to pay back. So what does revenue need to hit in order to pay that back? I'm told the NHL exceeded expectations last year. They were sort of hoping for a $5 or $5.2 billion season. And I was told that they ended up closer to $5.4 billion in hockey-related revenue. So in order to pay that debt back, they probably need to be in the range of somewhere between $5.5 to $5.7 billion in revenue. And all of that is a lot to say. You need to sell a lot of stuff in order to make that happen, including tickets, advertising, all those different things, jersey ad sales, in order to really pump that number up. So there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting in order to get that paid off. And the big reminder is if that debt is not paid off, the cap only increases by $1 million, and then it would have to slide until the following year for the cap to really increase. So a lot of the teams and managers that I have spoken to said, yes, that would be amazing to have the cap go up that much. But at this point, we're not banking on it, and we're proceeding moving forward as if the cap is only going to increase 1 million. And if it gets to that point, well, then we're all just in a great spot moving forward.
Yeah, Frank, we've seen some pretty big injuries so far in this season, and we already talked about Landeskog being out for the Avalanche. And take a look at the Florida Panthers. Learned yesterday that defenseman Eric Ekblad is going to be out for several months, it looks like, for that club. Is there any way the Panthers are going to be able to bring in some reinforcements to fill that gap from their number one defenseman who's now going to be out for a while?
Well, I think there's no question that the Florida Panthers are looking around, but only for temporary stopgaps that are affordable. Are there some younger players out there that could potentially slide into our lineup and for the foreseeable future as well that we'd be able to keep once Ekblad is back? That could be fits for our team. There's not very many of them out there. One of the names that we had spoken about previously was P.O. Joseph from the Pittsburgh Penguins, a team that's certainly in a spot where they have a lot of defensemen. And I know that there were a number of teams that had made offers on P.O. Joseph, but the Penguins weren't ready or willing to move on. And so the Panthers are in a spot where they're probably going to have to give some of their younger guys a chance to run with this, an opportunity to see whether guys like Lucas Carlson and Matt Kierstead can knock the door down and remain with this team before having to do something. The problem with Ekblad going on LTIR and this only being, potentially a 6-week injury or so, if that's the type of ballpark and timeline that they're dealing with, is that they have to account for him then coming back. So it's not like they can go out there and go shopping for Jacob Chikrin or someone that they could plug right into their lineup now. They also don't have a ton of future assets in order to make it work. So they're not really trying to go out and spend draft picks, I don't think, in order to fulfill a temporary stopgap solution. So all of that to say, you're probably going to see the Panthers stick with what they have for a little bit.
That's tough to think about. They've already lost Mackenzie Weegar in the offseason. Now Ekblad as well. That puts a big onus on Forsling and some of the other players that are in Florida to take up some of that air. So the NHL, to me, Frank, is kind of in a sticky situation here going into the 2024 World Cup of Hockey in regards to the players that are from Russia. So what's the latest on whether those players are going to be able to take part in the tournament?
Mike, this was a topic of conversation at the Board of Governors meeting following the meeting with Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly and Commissioner Gary Bettman, in that, what do you do? They've been looking for a solution. And one of the ideas that was raised was, do you treat the Russian players in this league, given the invasion of Ukraine and all that's the fallout that's come from that, do you just allow them to sort of play under the banner of, similar to what they did in the Olympics with the doping scandal? They called it Olympic athletes from Russia. You have Russian players that participate in the World Cup of Hockey, but they don't get to use the Russian banner and Russian flag. And the interesting thing is, Bill Daly had mentioned, hey, look, that may not be suitable to the other European teams that are scheduled to be part of this tournament, the traditional hockey powers like Finland and Sweden and go down the list, Czech Republic. We already saw the pushback from Dominik Hasek and the Czech Federation just about Russian players participating in the premier games in Prague to open this season. So the NHL is between a rock and a hard place. You can't actually have a best on best tournament, which is what we've all been salivating for since the 2014 Olympics in Sochi, without having Russian players part of it. That's one. The tournament isn't as strong, two, without Russian players participating. And three, how do you handle this from a perspective of you want to be fair to Russian players, most of whom have absolutely nothing to do with this ongoing invasion of Ukraine and are simply just wanting to play hockey. So they're in between a rock and a hard place. And while all of that's going on and trying to decide what to do with Russia, the league still has a ton of work to do with the double IHF in terms of trying to pull off this tournament. Gary Bettman said after the Board of Governors wrapped, whatever that deadline is to get this tournament up and running for February 2024, we are pushing against it. We're getting close to that point. So they need to make a lot happen, and it feels like there's been a lot that's been going on behind the scenes in order to do that, but nothing has come to fruition just yet. And this Russian situation, I think, plays a big part in that.